Food and agriculture and environmental reconstruction, 11% of emissions, 8 million jobs, and 400 billion over 10 years. Humans have been terrible stewards of the environment, right? And this is actually when I talk to like conservatives about climate change, I really try not to use the word climate change. The question I usually ask is, are we having a positive or negative impact on the earth the earth that sustains us? No one can say anything but negative, right? No one that is acting as an honest, you know, good faith actor when asked that question can say we're doing very well for the environment. No, everyone knows. And coming from a rural community, even the conservative farmers are talking about it, right? They see the damage that we're doing the environment, and they understand the damage that chemicalized modern industrial agriculture is doing, right? So we can turn back towards long-term survival, but only if we reconstruct a civilization that mimics nature in one important area, and it's an area we really haven't put anything into, and that's the large-scale recycling and reusing of almost everything we produce, from how and where we grow our food, to the safety and stability of our water systems, both drinking and natural, to working to restore our natural ecosystems that have been devastated under capitalism. We need to completely reorient our relationship with the natural world that sustained us, and we need to do so in a way that mimics the natural world, right? When we move towards regenerative agriculture, when we get rid of chemicalized agriculture, when we get rid of the monocrop system, when we get rid of corporate industrial farming, what we're going to need is a lot of workers, right? Green agriculture is more labor intensive. But the trade-off is green agriculture can actually restore, the damage that we've done. And we've talked a lot about baking things in and stuff. And, a lot of these, the previous kind of sections and sectors that we've talked about has been all about, getting us to zero. Well, in the food and agriculture and environmental reconstruction area, we can actually get into negatives, right? We can start actually pulling more carbon out of the air than we produce. So it's not just that we're trying to get to zero, it's that we're trying to, full stop on fossil fuel, get all of these sectors transitioned, and then have as many of these sectors as we can pulling carbon dioxide out of the air. So even if we do get to 2 degrees, we can pull it out and we can pull it back, and we can maybe start lowering that 2 degrees. And like Garrett said, every 1/10 of a degree helps. So regenerative agriculture mimics nature, right? For billions of years, plants have been sucking carbon dioxide out of the air and sequestering it in our soil. They pull it into their roots. When they die, the carbon stays in the ground and in the roots. But when you look at, our modern agriculture, we rip the roots out of the ground. We pull everything out. We need to completely reorient towards, kind of permaculture standards and things like that. Reforestation and afforestation is another important area for pulling carbon out, right? We've cut down a lot of trees, and trees they're sucking carbon dioxide out of the air and creating oxygen and sequestering that carbon that's left over down in the ground where it can sit, and where it has sit, right? The oil and the natural gas that we are drilling now it is the sequestered carbon from millions of years ago, right? And it sat there forever, for millennia. It sat there for millions of years. It sat there, and then we started burning and digging it up and burning it. And that's why we've created this kind of exponential increase in carbon emissions. And so we need to replant the forests that we have and the ecosystems that we have destroyed. And we need to, where it makes sense, introduce new carbon sink ecosystems where they might not have existed before. One really interesting thing about, kind of trees, I hear a lot of, there's a lot of talk about just planting a lot of trees and creating forests. Forests actually tend to be net zero on their oxygen production. They produce a lot of oxygen, but they have a lot of things living in them. that breathe oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, right? So we need to look at ways that we're planting these forests in ways that can get us a net positive. The lumber industry is a horrible, in its current incarnation, tends to be a horrible industry. But sustainable tree farms would be a place that would most likely have a negative, um, you know, and it would suck more carbon than it would release, because things wouldn't really live there as much, right? It's a commercial property for producing a sustainable building material in lumber, a renewable building material in lumber. Water infrastructure, Garrett said Flint, but really every city, especially kind of the eastern half of the United States, where things are much older. But even out west, almost every city has problems with their water infrastructure, whether it be lead or other problems. And the whole of the West is dealing with water crisis regularly. This plan would reintroduce the Civilian Conservation Corps, right? So when we say we need to plant more forests, that's who's going to do it. I spent some time living in southern Illinois, by the Shawnee, right on the edge actually of the Shawnee National Park. And if you go into Shawnee, you can actually find spots where all of a sudden you notice the trees are in lines, and you can still find the plaques that say this stand was planted by the CCC, during the original New Deal era. And they did that because the forests of southern Illinois were clear cut to put in farmland. So during the original New Deal era, they were able to, replant a lot of this and declare it national parks and give it, even those newly planted are not yet to the point of old growth. It takes a couple centuries for something to become old growth. So the Civilian Conservation Corps will be, a new outlet for people to engage civically and get jobs in addressing the climate crisis. And then we talked a little bit about carbon mineralization or carbon capture. It's generally used in Democrat talking points as a way to justify continuing burning. But there have been experiments. There's been a plant in Iceland that basically they take the carbon dioxide and they mix it with water. They suck it out of the air. They mix it with water, basically creating like tonic water, and then they inject it down into the ground into porous rock formations, and it solidifies into basically salt, carbon-based salt in the pores of those rock formations, and it should be a tool in our tool chest of reconstructing and rolling things back.